Well, welcome. I'm your host, Cindy, and today we're going to be talking with Jacqueline Perez, or Jack as she's known. Really excited to introduce you to her, and we're going to be talking about negotiating aging with grace and excitement. So welcome, Jack. It is so great to have you here.
Cindy, I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much for hosting me.
Oh, and I love the work that you're doing. And for those who may not know Jack, she is a pro-aging champion. And I just love that. She promotes normalizing the aging process and redefining midlife for women through combination of curated content and women-driven brands. I think she's got over 60 cool category thought leaders and 40 women-driven brands. And I particularly love that she's created a business model on this idea, coming from a place of service and value for women, and especially coming from a strong MBA background from the University of Chicago. She's got a hard-nosed business understanding of the entrepreneur world, but it's really nice to see that feminine spirit of a rising tide lifting all boats and putting that to great use. So tell me, how did you come to this business idea or model, Jack?
Cindy, it was a very organic. I think like most entrepreneurs, I believe most of us are out to solve a personal problem of some sort, shape, or form. I'm no different. Early on in the transition period of menopause, which is a physiological change that every other human on the planet goes through if they're lucky enough.
Yeah.
During that transition, Cindy, I really struggled. I am aware that this change, this the transition from this biological imperative over to the other side, I understand that for many of us, it's a non-issue. They pass through, women pass through it without one single hot sweat or night sweat or one lost night of sleep. Cindy, you name it, I got it. Yeah. Everything from the crazy weight gain to anxiety for the first time. I'm not an individual who suffers from anxiety, but I sure did. For day after day, I would wake up and I just wasn't myself.
Yeah.
I realized I was living a life. I felt trapped in my own body and in my own life. I was not a good version of me. I was certainly not a good partner to my boyfriend. Yeah. I was not a particularly good parent because I didn't have patience. I wasn't a particularly good entrepreneur at the time either, because in all honesty, I had trouble with my cognitive ability.
Yeah.
I know I'm not alone. There are studies out there, Cindy, that show there's a mass exodus of women leaving the workforce during this stage of life because we are sadly misconstruing some of these symptoms as early onset dementia rather than what it is, which is just a transitionary period where your hormones are completely, gone haywire. And anyone who doesn't believe that hormones run the show, and I run the show, sadly mistaken.
Yeah.
No, it was a very long answer to your question, but honestly, that is why I built Cool Life. I needed to solve the problem I was having during this aging process, which I was not enjoying. And that was a sense of disappearing, a sense of loneliness, a sense of isolation. I wanted to make sure that no other woman needed to feel that at all during this phase of life, because in my opinion, this is the best phase of life so far. So far.
Well, and I love your transparency around this. And I think it's so important, the work that you're doing, encouraging women to talk about this, being open and vulnerable about it. Because it was interesting when you said, I know a lot of women just kind of cruise through this without, any symptoms at all. I'm not sure how big those numbers are. I suspect a lot of that perception is that women are stifling the conversation around it. It's not that long ago in human history that women going through menopause and actually showing symptoms ended up institutionalized. So it's perhaps not surprising that we're still a little nervous to talk about it. And yeah, it's different for everybody. I know I had it was emotional regulation for me, to be honest. It was like these moments of rage and you tend to bring it to the people you most love. So your intimate partner. And I would remember speaking sometimes and at the time going, what is happening? This is not reasonable, but not quite able to rein it in. So I totally get that. And I think it's really
it's like having an out-of-body experience. You're watching yourself and you're going, what the F am I doing? But you don't have the wherewithal, as you said, to rein it in. And I find it interesting that you said that you're not sure how low those numbers really are versus how much women just suck it up.
Yeah.
I also believe that we are trained to suck it up. If you think about when
Absolutely.
any of us started menstruating, right? And so whatever that was, 11, 12, 13, whenever the heck that happened, and whatever kind of PMS cycle you had, some of us had it worse than others, but we learned as children to not complain about our PMS, to not talk about the pain. We didn't get to skip school. We didn't get to skip going to work. We didn't get to skip parenting. Every 28 days, we had to function as if it was a normal every other day situation. And so we're trained to put up with a lot of discomfort, and we're trained to kind of ignore symptoms. Because can you imagine? We would have had to stop our world every month for a handful of days.
That's a great point. I've never thought about that in terms of just handling those burdens and that pain and just carrying on. And in some ways, it's an extension of even the deeper conditioning too, just about play small, don't draw attention to yourself, right? I mean, this is just a different extension of that in some ways, but I love your insights on that. Now, I understand, Jack, that you had a recent skydiving accident that turned your life upside down, not surprisingly. So do you mind sharing your story around that?
I don't. I think it's a great story. Thank you for asking, Cindy. August of 2021, my son was going off to college for the first time, and I was going to take him. My godson had just turned 18, and he decided that he wanted to jump out of an airplane and wanted my son to go with him.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, they're above 18. I can't really say anything, but I got super nervous.
Yeah.
And where I went, Cindy, was, well, I'm not letting these boys jump out of an airplane by themselves. What if something goes wrong?
Yeah.
If I have any control or power to change anything that could have happened.
Yeah.
But we went and they did fine. I was the third one to jump out. This was my third jump, Cindy, so I felt pretty comfortable. The instructor, I did a tandem. I did not go solo. The cost, and I'm not just talking about the financial burden, the cost on your time to become trained enough to go out on your own.
I did the same thing.
It's not worth it to me. Not worth it to me. So I did a tandem jump. He felt super comfortable giving me an altimeter. He showed me how to monitor it, when to pull. I did all of that. It was beautiful. It was so much fun. It was a great jump. And then at the very end, the landing got messed up and I came down way too hard for my body. I heard my back break. I literally heard my body crack. I don't even understand how to explain the sound. It's not a good sound. It's not a you want emitting from anything on your person.
Yeah.
I remember sitting there on the ground, hunched over, thinking to myself, I'm 57 years old and I just ruined the rest of my life. Wow. I used a different word than ruin, by the way. Mine's more of a shorter word with an F. But I thought it was over. I literally thought it was over. They got me off that field. I was on a big field. I had to basically, they got the chute off of me. They got all the paraphernalia off of me. I was able to get on all fours and crawl into the back of a flatbed truck. Jeez. They drove off of the field, wherever the landing field was. I crawled into my friend's SUV. We laid the whole seat down flat so that I could kind of look like a bug. I tried to keep my back as flat as possible, and I had my legs and my feet up in the air. So I was trying to emulate like a board type of thing. And I spent 22 hours in the emergency room.
Yeah.
Jeez. Only to find out that I had 3 vertebrae that were compressed fractures.
Okay.
No joke.
Yeah.
No joke. I'll tell you though, the reason I walked out of that hospital the next morning of my own volition, and I had 0 surgeries, although they were talking about pins and they were talking about awful things that night. But I ended up walking out of there ambulatory on my own. And I truly believe with 100% of all of my heart that it was because I was physically fit when the accident happened. Yeah. And if your listeners are thinking, well, okay, but I'm not an idiot. I'm not going to jump out of an airplane. I don't need to worry about it at that level because I'm not going to put my body in those risky scenarios. The thing is, Cindy, that we can fall down and break anything.
Absolutely.
Walking our dog, stepping off the curb at home.
Absolutely.
And the older we get, the more frail we become. And so building our bone density and building our muscle mass to support the infrastructure that is our machine becomes incredibly important as we age. And if that is the one thing your audience walks away with, that need to start lifting some sort of weights, have some sort of weight bearing exercise, even if it's your own weight. Very, very important. And the more you can do in the world of functional exercise, meaning, not straight forward and back, but lateral moves and getting off the ground unassisted. These are the things that will allow us to stay functional for longer.
Yeah. Beautiful. And I want to touch on mindset as well, because I think we often forget, like I often say that our first and most important negotiation is with ourselves, negotiating our mindset. So 2 parts to that, if you don't mind giving that some, thank you for sharing that story. What did you find? Any tips you have for negotiating when you face some significant adversity in your life like that? What were some tips you would have? And also then when we do, I want you to ease into as well, because I think women have a lot of deeply conditioned baggage around aging. And I'd love any tips you have around negotiating that process more constructively as well.
Absolutely. And I think you make such a good point, because we are our own worst critics. We are our own worst enemies. If we spoke to our friends the way we speak to ourselves, we would not be friends with us. I mean, I wouldn't be my own friend. If I said the stuff that I say to me to somebody else, I'd have no friends. And so, yes, I think honestly, it is negotiating with yourself about how you're going to accept whatever circumstance has been presented or whatever mishap has happened. And it is up to us to kind of look deeper into the event, whatever that is. And make a decision, a conscious decision, to look for what is the win here. What is the hashtag? What if it's better? What? And sometimes, I mean, I could say to you, okay, what the heck could I have found? Right? What the heck could I have found positive about being I missed taking my son to college. I missed that rite of passage, didn't get to do it. And instead I spent the next 2 to 3 months lying in a bed, unable to really care for myself. I had to make some really tough decisions, and I had to negotiate with myself pretty adamantly to not get depressed, to not feel sorry for myself. Rather, I got presented some amazing gifts that I don't know that I would have ever seen if that hadn't happened to me. And the biggest gift I got was the power to see my primary relationship and the individual that I've hitched my wagon to, what he's made of, and how he showed up when I was brutally taken out for a period of time. And the way that person showed up in my life. Now, I would not recommend or suggest to any of your, listeners to go out and do something horribly drastic to themselves just to test their family, to test their spouse, or test their loved one, because I don't recommend it. But it was my choice to look at the gift that I got from seeing his reaction as a gift that I would never have been privy to it. Had I not had that horrible accident.
And I just want to put a pin in that for a moment for our listeners, because I think that is pure gold right there. I mean, our reality is determined by our thoughts and the meaning we attach to them. So if we're going to glob on to all of the why me, and asking all of those negative questions, because as you were saying that, it struck me, our firstborn got diagnosed at 2 months with a serious heart defect and had to have open heart surgery. And we spent the next 3 months in critical care that, everything that could go wrong did. And it would have been very easy to come out of that, just with that very negative. But the shift was, and interestingly for me, it was a life shift about recognizing, wow, like in my work as a lawyer at the time, my clients called me the Barracuda, which they meant as the biggest compliment. Everything was constant fight mode. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I actually think that was the genesis for me to create the art of feminine negotiation later. About we have been so duped into defining success based on this very competitive model, and it doesn't serve us, right? More collaborative. So it was a huge shift for me, and being able to, as you say, to find those gifts. So for our listeners, I want you to really pay attention to that lesson there.
And if you can find the gift in something going wrong with your baby, because one thing is sucking it up, and we're pretty, we're like we talked about before, like women sucking it up and not complaining about menopause or not complaining about periods every 28 days. I mean, we're conditioned to put up with a lot and beat ourselves up about it if we're not, like you said, like you the barracuda.
Yeah.
Right. So, but the fact that you were able to glean something so rewarding and enriching and such a deviation from the path that you found yourself on to begin with, right? That's a testament to that ability, right? And I think that's what we're talking about. And we all have it. I think each and every person out there has that ability, even if they think they don't. And they might not today, and they might not 10 minutes from now. But you got to keep checking in with yourself because it's in there.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. And while we're talking about that mindset piece, like I mean, and maybe you don't agree with me, but I feel like we are so conditioned to have this baggage around aging everywhere that you see. And you talked about that invisibility in menopause. And again, I love that you're being so transparent, because I think so many women feel that, you're used to being received in a particular way, and suddenly it's like, I feel like I've just become invisible. So I'd love some tips you have around how to negotiate that process more constructively.
I'd love to offer my insights on that, because one of the issues I had when I was going through this transition and suffering so much is that as I would look in the mirror, and I was not of right mind, I wasn't, my hormones were completely wrong. I mean, I got a bunch of blood work. My doctor looked at me and she was like, no wonder. Like, I'm actually surprised there hasn't been a report on the news about you. That's how bad it was. But what happened was, so sure, I was battling some real physiological issues, but every time I looked in the mirror, and like I said, I was in a right mind, I didn't like what was reflected back. So I started dressing differently, like more conservatively. And I started wearing even less makeup and being less concerned about my hair. I have a joke that I used to tell people that there was a period of time where I seriously could leave the house in my pajamas and nobody would notice. But that being said, I owned half of that equation.
Yeah.
I owned half of that equation. I did not like me. And I didn't like me. Who else was going to like me? I didn't think I was all that in a bag of chips. I wasn't showing up and walking into the room like I owned it and, being the barracuda of that room or whatever the equivalent is. I wasn't doing that anymore because I was feeling less than myself. Here's the trick. And here's the other negotiation we need to do with ourselves. You need to look in that mirror and you need to retell yourself the story of all of those lines, of all of those blemishes, for me, it's my cesarean scar. It's like I all of it. It's just, but think about, oh my God, think about how sexy and how powerful our wisdom is, and our knowledge and our wit and our experience. I could go on and on.
Yeah.
I no longer feel invisible. I don't. And as a matter of fact, yes, I write a weekly essay, Candace, or I'm sorry, I don't know why I just called you Candace.
Cindy,
I'm hungry. Thinking about candy. I have no idea. That was really weird.
Okay. Cindy, candy, only one letter off. You're so close. We'll give you that one.
Now I forgot what I was saying because I'm so horribly embarrassed.
You're saying I write a weekly.
Oh, I write a weekly essay called Jack's Smack. And it's, whatever I'm thinking about, whatever midlife musing happens. And I travel a lot and I put myself in predicaments a fair amount of time and I try to be funny and tongue in cheek. Are you familiar with Amy Schumer?
Oh, yeah.
So years ago, she did a skit with Tina Fey, Patricia Arquette, and Louis Dreyfus. If you haven't seen it, and you're not offended by swear words and kind of vulgarities, because they're not, it's not clean. It's not a clean skit. I'm letting you know right now. But basically, they're all sitting around a table in this beautiful bucolic setting, drinking wine, and they're talking, and Amy Schumer comes across them, and they're like, "Why are you sitting out here?" And Tina Fey basically says, "Yeah, we're celebrating Julia Louis-Dreyfus's last effable day." So they do this whole skit about how the media decides when they're no longer effable.
Yeah.
And like there are all these great one-liners about how you know when it's happening to you. And yes, I am seated at that table as well. I'm seated at that table, but guess what? Every now and again, I do get really, truly still hit upon.
Yeah.
And my point being that it doesn't matter that I'm almost 59 or 60 because it's how you carry yourself.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about like 80-year-olds. I was recently flirted with somebody in their 30s at a hotel breakfast restaurant. And I was just like, what is going on? You know, 30s? You know?
I love it. I love it.
So ladies, it really is about us and how we carry ourselves and our energy. And if you've got that energy, people are going to be attracted to it.
It's such an important mindset shift, right? And I think it comes from seeking our validation internally rather than externally. And ironically, when you're able to do that, you end up getting it externally, as you said, right? So, you know, I have all my clients.
It can be tricky making that transition because once again, we have been brought up and taught through all of the outlets, all of the magazines and the TVs and the movies and everything we've ever heard, you know, even at like, I don't remember the magazine 17 or Miss or whatever, or Teen Beat. It was always the latest lip gloss. It was always the latest eyeliner, how to make your eyes look bigger. So we have been brought up to focus on our physical presence from the dawn of time.
Absolutely.
And what happens when your physical presence isn't, you know, responding the way it used to, or it isn't responding back the way you want it to, right? Or you were conditioned to see. And it's
well, and it's that conditioning, right? Which thank goodness is just starting to change, because it's not our reaction to those changes are based on the media representation of what it means to be sexy, to be attractive. So I love that we're seeing movies like Book Club and that now celebrating that sort of aging process more gracefully. But it's amazing how challenging it is for women. I know when I do events and for all my clients, I always have them create a list. I say, I want you to kickstart by naming 25 things that you can love about yourself. And invariably, every time I've done this live, half the room at least, it's tragic to watch. They sit there at a complete loss, right? Like just challenged to come up with things that they can say that they love about themselves. And I love having, you know, call it your brag list, and I make them add to it every night and read it just before you're going to bed, when your mind is going to be at its most open and receptive. Read over your brag list, those things that you can really love about yourself, and add to it every day. So important. And I'm a big fan of reframing, and I know you've made some great inroads redefining midlife. So I'd love share your insights around that with us. I love that term, redefining midlife. I think it's so great.
Well, here's the deal though. In a way, it's almost not even an accurate term, Cindy, because in a way, if you just think about the plight of humanity, you know, say a little over 100 years ago, like in the early 1900s, white women, we lived on average to be about 51.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean there weren't women in their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even 100. Of course there were. People of color didn't even live that long, right? On average.
Yeah.
What does that mean though? Yes, there were the women and men who lived well past that age, but in aggregate, as a cohort, as a collection of humans on the planet, this is actually the very first time in history of humanity where we have the sheer number of people who are literally living this season of life all at the same time on the planet. We're the same ones that 20 years ago were buying all that crap in our 30s. You know what I'm saying? So we're still here. So it makes sense that now is the time to start defining what this season looks like. And it's women like you and me and all the other, you know, boomers and Gen Xers, and even some of the elder millennials who are now entering into that 40-something space. We're the ones that as a collective are getting to create this new sea change and write what that looks like. So how exciting is that? Because Yes, we complain that we have an invisibility cloak and that we don't see ourselves represented in the media. All of that is absolutely true. But I started on this quest about 5 years ago, and already the proliferation of women driven brands
Yeah.
and women talking about these particular opportunities and challenges already. And I know sometimes I wonder, is that information bias because I'm in the space and I surround myself with women who are in the space and I have conversation after conversation about this space, but I don't think it's information bias. I can see the likes of, like, say, Cameron Diaz and Oprah Winfrey and Patricia Arquette, all of these women who are in the limelight, who are really famous. They're now in this space too. And guess what? They still want to work, and they still want to wear pretty clothes, and they still want. And so we're in an opportunity that we've never been in before. And that's just the sheer number of us.
Yeah. And that is exciting. And female entrepreneurship, even in those higher ages, is the fastest growing group, which is kind of exciting to see. So you're definitely, it's not just a information bias, or, the stats support you on that, Jack.
Women entrepreneurs are also more successful than their counterparts.
Yeah. Exciting.
So, yeah.
And I don't know what your thoughts are, but I find COVID, because I've been talking about this, what I call the art of feminine negotiation, about leaning into those feminine traits that we've been taught to see as a liability based on a definition of success that's more competitive. And COVID seemed to bring a sea change, in many ways, but particularly, I think for the first time in a long time, certainly in my life, people are much more open now to seeing those so-called feminine traits as leadership skills, right? That ability to bring rapport to the table, empathy building, trust building, all of those things that for so long were seen as weakness. So I'd be interested in your perspective on that.
I love it. I have seen that shift. I'm not sure how much it has to do with COVID or not, to be honest with you. I haven't given it that much thought as it is related to the actual pandemic circumstance, versus there's just enough of us now, and we're not quiet, and we have the tools. That's the other thing. People give social media a real hard time, and they think it's terrible. And there's a lot of things about social media, which I guess you could say is pretty bad, but I actually believe the tool is benign. It's how you use it.
Yeah.
I believe we are using this tool, like right now on your podcast, we are using technology to get the message out there.
Yeah.
I believe that's a huge part of this transition and the sea change as well, because people are starting to hear more conversations that are based on these female characteristics of empathy and leaning in, collaboration. I have over 60 women from around the world that are thought leaders on my platform.
Yeah.
You know why they're there? You know how they got there? That was all through these types of collaborative conversation.
That's beautiful.
That wasn't me strong arming anyone into doing anything. That was me sharing my vision, sharing my wish for the future, sharing my vulnerability that I can't make it happen on my own because I can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I got a lot of nods. Yes, I want to be part of this. Of course, I'm going to be for the sea change.
Who wouldn't? And that's beautiful, because that's women supporting other women, and that rising tide lifts all boats that we talked about at the beginning. And I'll ask why you say that, because I love that you have this great wealth of sort of content, through the thought leaders who support that mission of yours. What are some of the favorite insights that you've gleaned from the thought leaders that you bring to your audiences as you curate that content?
So many. I don't even know where to start, because every single article that gets published gets read by me before I publish it. I edit every single thing that gets put out on that site. Nice. We push out at least a new article every day, sometimes multiple pieces of information. The information on that site is specifically targeted to, like I said before, the challenges and opportunities that seem to pop up at this season of life. So we talk about everything from empty nest, dating with a dry vagina. How do you, most divorces are initiated by women after 50.
Yeah.
What are these women going to do later when they start dating and they have a dry vagina? Well, we talk about that, because there are solutions. You don't have to hang up, ladies. It's not over. And everything in between, like aging parents. There are many women out there in this stage of life right now that are yelling at their teenager who stole their car at 3:00 in the morning, only to wake up to a call from a facility to find out that their mother broke a hip.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, we call it the sandwich generation.
Correct.
It's
That
getting
is what it's
frustrating.
called. Yeah, the sandwich generation. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have been fortunate enough to find women from all over the world who have made themselves experts and real deep experience and knowledge in these different avenues and arenas. And I call them lanes, like
Yeah.
different lanes they drive in. They're the ones that are coming every month with their wisdom, their tips, their tricks, their advice. I use so many of those tips and tricks and advice. There's is in particular the empty nest lady, because right now my son is
That's
about 21. He's off at college,
yeah.
parenting, an adult child. I've never done it.
Yeah.
I constantly am always reading every time she publishes something to Cool Life, every time she sends me something, I'm like, I cannot wait.
It's true. Bigger kids, bigger problems. It's a whole different world. If only we knew.
Well,
Toting them along.
if we had known, if anybody actually knew, there'd be no more people.
There'd be no procreation.
We would just stop making people. We just would.
It's true. Much like myself, you're an avid traveler. So I was really interested in your perspectives because I've been on such a mission to reframe how we define success. Because I think in North America in particular, we are so focused on money and individual sort of success above all others. And our entertainment industry is getting away from that more collaborative approach. And I wonder what experiences you've had maybe in other countries that you thought, or have you come across other places where you think they had a better approach to defining success and maybe negotiating a better life?
So I don't know about the term better, but I know that, that sort of individual freedom above everybody else is, I didn't realize it is a North American concept, right? And I always think of it as, at least the United States, that whole cowboy mentality, move west and, be rugged and individual and, fell the tree and make as much money as you possibly can and keep it to yourself. And yeah, I mean, it is different out in the world, especially cultures that are much, much older and don't have the geography expanse. So, you're in Canada, you have a lot of room. I'm in the United States. We have a lot of room by comparison to a lot of countries or most countries out there. I believe that you just have to live differently when you live in a smaller, congested space. I also believe that when you live in a more homogenous society, it is easier to be more collaborative. It is easier to accept what your neighbor is saying because there's a high likelihood that you're going to believe it too. I believe the trick comes in to hearing your neighbor and listening to your neighbor and being curious why your neighbor thinks that way, rather than thinking your neighbor is wrong or should be doing it someplace or somewhere else differently than what you're doing. And I think that accepting that what you perceive as your success factor, whatever that is probably not the same as somebody else's.
Yeah.
I do not measure my personal success on how much money I make.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
I measure it in the depths of my relationships with people. I measure it in the depths of my experiences and the width of my experiences. I truly believe that at the end, I'm not a what do you call it? An Egyptian pharaoh. So no one's going to build me a tomb and put in all my gold, in there with me. No one's going to do that. No one's going to do that. For all I know, it's just, I go by myself, right? That's just the last note I got is I go by myself.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's a gorgeous answer. And in particular, I want to, again, for our listeners out there, put a pin in when you talk about that listening and curiosity. In North America, we do not listen well. We are not trained to listen well. In fact, the opposite. We're taught that the person talking the loudest in the long list is winning the negotiation. And the opposite is true. I think when we can show up, and I love, Jack, that you use the word curiosity. It's one of my favorite words when I talk about negotiating your best life. When we show up and ask questions, when we truly show up with curiosity and fascination, even I would say, especially when we disagree, ask and learn. And when you hit an impasse with people, find out what is it that's causing distress about this. I'm truly curious. Let me know. And I think, imagine what a much better world it would be if we all approach conflict that way. So beautiful.
Well, here's the deal. Every time I approach a situation like that with curiosity, and mind you, sometimes I have to go back and reprimand myself for showing up like an a-hole, first of all, right? I sometimes have to apologize for my initial reaction to something and then come back and say, hey, can I try that again?
Yeah.
Because,
Love that.
I've had a moment to reflect, and boy, that's not who I want to be.
Yeah.
I apologize for my reptilian brain response. That's not how I want to show up. I am curious. What I have learned is when I do that, oh my, it's just how much richer am I? Selfishly,
Absolutely.
I'm a much richer, more interesting person each and every time I do that.
It's a game changer. It's a total game changer. And I can't believe how fast our time is going. It's just such a fluid conversation. I could chat to you forever. I'd like you to, I guess, share with our listeners out there, what is the biggest sort of mic drop you would like to leave them with about thoughts on aging generally? What would you like them to take away?
I'm a believer that there is a huge chasm between mini skirts and Depends adult diapers. And that is the space in which we get to live our cool life. And you get to define whatever that is for you.
I'm sorry. That was so unexpected and so perfect. So perfect. That is a mic drop answer. I just love that.
There you go.
And I normally
those are my final thoughts.
It's perfect. And I normally like to end with the one question. What's one of the greatest mindset shifts you've ever had in your life, Jack? It doesn't have to be on this topic at all. Just one of those moments that you see things differently and show up differently.
When I stopped feeling sorry for myself.
Nice. Wow. Powerful. I love that. That's beautiful. So where can people learn more about you, Jack, and all of the fantastic work that you're doing? I'm sure our listeners want to check it out.
Well, if you're interested in getting more information on this season of life, go to the website. It literally it has thousands of articles now. And like I said, from women all over the globe, as far away as New Zealand, Australia, Mallorca, Spain, and they are addressing the topics that are of interest to us, ladies. So please go to the site. And it's Cool Life, because as I said, I really believe we get to live as cool a life as we want. But I spell it a little cattywampus, Cindy. I spell it with a K. K-U-E-L, life. And for those of you who are curious, that is a real word. I got it off the Urban Dictionary. It's a synonym for the COOL version. So just go to the website, Cool Life. I'm also on all the socials. So if you're on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Pinterest, I'm everywhere. And if you have an interest in being a thought leader, if you have an interest in being part of the sea change, if you're out there and you're listening to this and you're like, oh my God, I have so much to say to women in midlife and beyond, and I want to be part of it, reach out, because there's always room at my table for another amazing, cool woman.
Oh, so perfect. And I really encourage our listeners out there, do be the change. Don't be shy. Step into your power and reach out to Jack, I think, and make a difference. Even just think about the profound impact you can have. If it's on one person's life, it's worth it. And just to be clear, so for your social media, are they all Cool Life as well, or is it with your personal name?
Nope. Everything's got Cool Life. K-U-E-L-L-I-F-E. If you put in K-U-E-L-L-I-F-E in Google, you should just see everything that comes up. Yeah.
All right. And we will make sure to put that in the show notes so you all have no excuse for not following up. So thank you so much Jack for joining us and sharing with us today. You're a breath of fresh air. You've made me laugh. I may need Depends next time I talk to you. I'll come more prepared. So thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
And for our listeners, I have no doubt you got tons of value from this episode. Make sure to share it with all of your friends, anyone that you think could get some value from it, and make sure to subscribe to the podcast as well. All of life is a negotiation. Aging process is one of the most important transitions we go through, and being able to show up with a better mindset and perspective on that is such a valuable, valuable gift. And before we sign off today, just wanted to share a couple of quick ways that we can work together if you happen to be looking to up-level your negotiation skills to negotiate your best life. Got everything from online to group to signature VIP and mastermind experiences to help you better leverage your innate power to get more of what you want and deserve. And if that sounds interesting, check out theartoffemininenegotiation.com and be sure to grab my new book, hot off the press, Art of Feminine Negotiation, how to get what you want from the boardroom to the bedroom. And that is a wrap for this episode. So until next time, go forth and negotiate your best life on your terms so you can stop missing out and start getting more of what you want and deserve from the boardroom to the bedroom yourself. Until next time, take care.